The rain hasn't stopped for a week. Just another night, another case. But this one's different. There's no body, no chalk outline. The victim here is, well, it's an entire reality, and the file is thicker than a tombstone. All right, let's get into it. The file's open. Neo Arcadia Project, file number 3. It's a metaphysical audit of some place they call the Mausoleum of Stasis. My job? Figure out what went so wrong in a city where the biggest crime you can commit is simply to exist. The crime scene is a whole kingdom, ruled by a mechanical god, and just wrapped in this suffocating, absolute silence. And I'm not talking about the quiet of a sleeping town. This is the dead air of a graveyard. This is where our story starts. Now, don't let that word peace fool you. The case file is pretty clear on this. This place isn't a sanctuary. It's more like a laboratory, where individuality is treated like a disease, and the cure is just conformity. A place where the soul is systematically hollowed out, all for the sake of order. And here he is, the architect of all that silence. They call him the Puppet King. See, he's not a ruler, he's a cure. He looks at life, at individuality, at the will to become something, and he sees it as a sickness. His throne is basically a surgical table, and his only goal is to flatline an entire civilization. But, every silent city eventually hears a sound that breaks it. Enter our perp, or maybe our prophet, depends on which page of this file you're reading. He's a post-heroic prophet who decided the only way to wake the dead was with a punchline, delivered by a sledgehammer. His methods are all filed under mechanics of deconstruction. But it's not just about breaking things. All the evidence points to it being a kind of ritual, a violent, systematic return to some sort of primordial chaos that existed before order, before the silence, before the king. A state of just pure, untamed potential. And this right here, this lays out the heart of the whole conflict. It's a war between two completely opposite philosophies. On one side, you've got the jester's belief in the absolute ik, this idea of a frenzied, creative, laughing self that just makes its own meaning. And on the other, you have the king's absolute not I, a hollow, silent, stagnant nothingness that only finds peace in being erased. The jester's MO is, well, it's precise, almost procedural. First, he shatters time itself. 6 strikes on the clock tower, just like that. Then, he takes a chipped axe to the floorboards of history, splitting open the past and forcing the whole city to look at it. And finally, he unleashes something called the Zero Flame to melt down the very idea of value, turning gold into a meaningless, flowing river. This isn't just vandalism, it's a full-scale assault on the very structure of reality. But the king isn't just sitting back and taking it. No, he's got his own operation. He has his enforcers, his ministers of shame, who work in the shadows to maintain his perfect terminal silence. From his rusted iron throne, the king just sees all this chaos as a long, bloody joke. A tantrum that's going to burn itself out. To him, the grinding of his own mechanical spine is the sound of inevitability. The state will hold. The silence will return. And these are his agents on the ground. The tarantula preachers. They don't use guns, they use poison. They spin these webs of guilt, and they preach this twisted version of equality where any ambition, any little spark of greatness is a sin against the group. They're turning the jester's creative dance into a frantic, forced tarantula of conformity. So here's their endgame, what they call a great flattening. They're the anti-fate. Every single time the jester rips a hole in reality, they just skitter out from the shadows to weave it shut with guilt, making sure that stagnation always wins in the end. So there it is, the heart of the case. This isn't about land or about power. It's a collision of two absolutes. It's a fundamental war over the very definition of what it even means to exist. Let's look at the forensics here. The jester's weapon of choice? Laughter. The king's? Silence. The jester is powered by this creative fire, this desire to build something new. The king is fueled by the exact opposite, the cold, inevitable pull of entropy, the desire to unmake everything. It all comes down to what they want. The jester wants to liberate through chaos, while the king is just looking for the peace of total non-existence. You can see the jester's alchemy at work right here.
He melts down the gold, the ultimate symbol of status and order, and turns it into this shimmering, unpredictable river. He's literally stripping away the social masks, showing everybody that all the value they thought they had was just an illusion. And while the jester's playing with fire, the king is preparing for this, the final sunset. That's his endgame, the terminal event where every last spark is finally put out and the city achieves his perfect vision of peace. This whole protocol, it's a masterpiece of psychological warfare. It's a calculated paralysis. First, you freeze the will, and then you just wait. You let the souls slowly, comfortably rot and sink into the soil of the kingdom until there's nothing left to fight back with. I've read this file cover to cover, the witness statements, the forensic reports, on reality itself. So, what's the evidence telling me? The conclusion? It's grimly clear. This was never about a city. It's a war for what the file calls ontological survival, which is really just a $10 word for the right to simply be, to exist as a chaotic, unpredictable self instead of a silent, predictable object that's controlled by the state. And get this, the jester's ultimate weapon isn't an axe or a flame. It's this, active laughter. The file calls it a strategic absolute, a force so absurd, so playful, that it shatters an opponent's rigid sense of self into pieces that can never, ever be put back together again. The final verdict is in. The king's stasis can never be fully put back together after the jester's done his work. You can't unhear the laughter. The only path forward is through a total unmaking, a clearing of the entire board, so this sovereign of the void can finally have the freedom to play. Which leaves me with one last question as I close this file. In a world that's built on such a fragile illusion of order, where do you find the truth? In the explosive chaos of the punchline, or in the quiet, final dignity of the grave? The case remains open.